Alright, Xenoblade is easily my favorite video game franchise of all time. Ever since I beat Xenoblade 2, I've been dying to see a Xenoblade 3 where the worlds merge, and we finally have it. And now that I've beaten Xenoblade 3, which doesn't even feel real by the way, I've had a lot of positive thoughts that I feel like sharing with you guys. So, coming from a massive Xenoblade fan, and I'll try not to be biased, this is my review of Xenoblade 3. And don't worry, I won't include any spoilers from Xenoblade 3 or previous titles. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about the first and most prominent aspect, the story. The Xenoblade franchise is well known for its amazing story and lovable characters, and Xenoblade 3 is no different. In fact, Xenoblade 3 has my personal favorite ending out of any Xenoblade game so far, and with at least a 60-hour runtime, the story keeps you hooked and immersed throughout the whole ride. Something that I really liked about this game in particular was its use of flashbacks and memories, which I mean, wow, it's really groundbreaking, isn't it? But this game emphasizes the characters' memories even more so than previous entries. Even from the beginning, there's a lot of flashbacks to when the main party from Keves were children, and it kind of makes the overall structure a little bit more mysterious and dark by really showing the player how traumatic these characters' lives have been, given that they're only born to serve a nation in war for their entire lives, as short as they are. And as of typical Xenoblade nature, the story progresses exponentially in such an exciting way, and while some parts can feel slow, they ultimately pay off with insane jaw-dropping moments to follow up. I didn't feel like there were as many insane or frequent plot twists as the first few games, but there's still a few. In fact, there's a few plot twists later in the game that kind of felt dumb and reused, and throughout the story, they keep building up these mysterious moments with the villains, and by the end, it was kind of anticlimactic. And when I beat the game, there were a lot of questions I still had that went completely unexplained, but I guess a lot of these questions aren't really that mind-boggling to come up with an answer to, and most of it is just up to the player's interpretation. They could always be planning a Xenoblade 4 since they didn't answer everything, but with my knowledge from the past few games, I was surprised with how little they revealed about the connection between all three games. However, we do get one of the best casts of characters in this new world, and the voice acting is a solid step up from the last game. Harry McIntyre did a great job as Noah, and is definitely on par with Adam Howden's role as Shulk. Some characters I didn't even like that much at first, but over the course of the game, they've really grown on me. And while I feel like some of these characters could have had more emphasis on their story arcs, you really get to see many different sides to them throughout the story, and you really feel for them. Even with the villains, I feel like this game does a better job than the past two games at humanizing them and giving them understandable reasons for their actions. Not that they should be forgiven for all the things they've done, but you definitely get to understand a few of the villains even more so in this game. But with such a great story and set of characters, you really can't enjoy it enough without the core feature, the gameplay. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Xenoblade 3 does a significantly better job at its clarification and conciseness in its tutorials than Xenoblade 2, and this makes the gameplay a lot more enjoyable because the game really encourages you to do more and explore more. Look, I'm the type of guy that doesn't really do a lot of side quests. I absolutely speedran the stories of the first two games when I got them, but with Xenoblade 3, I found myself slowing down a lot more and taking time to actually do side quests. Now, personally, I think that was just because I didn't want to be ridiculously underleveled, but either way, both the tutorials and the overall gameplay have improved quite a bit since the previous games. And on the topic of side quests, I didn't find myself doing too many, but with the ones that I did, they weren't exactly boring fetch quests like with the previous games. However, the most interesting side quests have to be the hero quests, where you can unlock a 7th non-player party member to join your team. And there's even a few hero quests that allow you to upgrade the characters in your main party. But side quests aside, the combat really combines the best parts of the last two games and throws away all the unnecessary and confusing junk. And it's really damn fun in this game. I think the change that definitely most impacted combat was the removal of the party gauge, which in the previous games was used to both revive party members and activate a chain attack once full. And this change I personally loved because in the first two games I prioritized keeping my party gauge full so I could revive my teammates rather than dealing massive damage, because it was never explained very well to me on how to effectively use chain attacks. But now that healers can revive party members at will and you can use chain attacks immediately without that repercussion, I really enjoyed combat a lot more. And yes, they did modify it so that only healers can revive team members, but it's quite a fair trade in my book. So while the combat and gameplay is great and unique to this entry, a really important factor to maintaining that is the game's performance. I actually had a few problems with the performance of Xenoblade 3, but definitely not enough to make me love the game any less. Keep in mind, my Switch is 5 years old, so that might very well be a cause of the problem, but there were a few brief moments where my game would just freeze for about 3 to 5 seconds and create a jittery noise. But in terms terms of graphics, they definitely are an improvement from the previous games on Switch, especially in the sense that they didn't use the same sharpening method as they did in handheld mode for Xenoblade 2. And on the topic of its graphics, I really like the art style they went with. It doesn't feel overly anime and inconsistent like Xenoblade 2. When the game's docked, it looks great, and it's obviously not on an Xbox or a PlayStation, so it runs and looks relatively good for what it is. In handheld mode, I found myself playing for quite a bit at a time, and at certain points, the frame rate would decrease by a lot. It looked like it was at about 15 frames per second, which can definitely be distracting with the frequency and quality of cutscenes you experience. But I haven't heard of many people having any performance issues like the ones I mentioned, so that's more of a look at it from my experience. Otherwise, this is a case very similar to Breath of the Wild, where it's absolutely astounding with the fact that this can run well on Switch, and Monolith Soft have really become more and more ambitious with every entry and the limits of the technology they have. So overall, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is yet another masterpiece to add to the series, and while it's not perfect, I definitely believe it is the best entry in the series so far, because at the root of its gameplay, they truly combine the best features of the last two games. Its story can have some lackluster moments, but the raw emotion you'll feel by the end of the game overrides all of that. If it's not already clear, I highly recommend Xenoblade 3 if you're looking for a ridiculously massive and fun adventure. I plan on making more videos going over theories or questions I have after beating the game, so if you've already completed the wild ride that is Xenoblade 3, subscribe for more of that content. That said, I'll see you next time.